Imagine working for someone who needs to approve every email before it goes out. Not because you're incompetent. You've been doing this for years. You know the clients. You know the process. But they need to check it anyway. Just to make sure. Just to be safe. They rewrite your sentences. Not because they're wrong, but because they're not quite right. They check your calendar. They ask for updates on things you already finished. They hover during presentations you're giving. And when you finally ask for more autonomy, they look at you like you've suggested setting the building on fire. Or maybe it's a parent, the kind who calls 3 times during your vacation to ask if you remembered to do the thing they already reminded you about twice, who texts you the weather forecast for your own city, who insists they're only helping. Yet somehow every interaction leaves you wondering, am I really this bad at basic adult life? A parent who cannot watch you do something, anything, without correcting the technique, the method, the order. Or maybe it's a partner, the one who reorganizes what you just organized because this makes more sense, who redoes the dishes you already did because you missed a spot, who has a better way for everything and gets genuinely distressed, not annoyed, distressed, when you don't follow it, who plans every date, every trip, every dinner, every conversation topic, and then resents you for never taking initiative. If someone just flashed in your mind, a face, a name, a specific feeling, you already know this isn't about being organized or having high standards. Instead, this is about something else entirely. See, these people aren't control freaks. That's just the word people use when they're exhausted and out of patience. But that label doesn't explain anything. It doesn't explain why delegation feels impossible. It doesn't explain why independence from others feels threatening rather than relieving. It doesn't tell you the why. They can't delegate without hovering, can't give instructions without watching, can't trust that something will get done unless they're personally overseeing it. And when you try to do something independently, they interpret it as a threat. Not consciously, though, but you can still feel it. They have meltdowns over things that don't seem to matter to anyone else. The wrong brand of paper towels, a slight change to the plan, someone arriving at 7:05 instead of 7, and their reaction is so disproportionate that everyone around them starts walking on eggshells. Inside their head, the logic feels airtight. If I don't manage this, something will go wrong. If I don't check, it'll fall apart. If I don't intervene, I'll have to clean up a bigger mess later. And here's the uncomfortable part. They're often right. Things do go wrong when they step back, but only because they've built a system that requires constant intervention to function. They've become the load-bearing wall of their own life, and slowly, of everyone else's. The people around them don't call it leadership or responsibility anymore. They call it exhausting and suffocating. They start lying about small things just to avoid the interrogation. They stop sharing plans because every plan becomes a project managed by this person. And the control person? They see all of this and think, see, I can't trust anyone. I have to do everything myself. I'm the only one who cares, so why? Why does someone become like this? What happened that made control feel like oxygen? Why can't they just exist without managing every single variable around them? Because the answer isn't they're just difficult. The answer is older than that. Look, control doesn't start with personality or temperament. It starts with unpredictability that a child couldn't tolerate. It starts with an environment where letting go meant something bad happened, and it most likely happened more than once. Maybe they grew up in a house where things were unstable, a parent who drank and the whole house shifted based on what mood they came home in. Parents who fought, not argued, but fought, and you never knew which night would be the bad one. Financial collapse that happened without warning. Constant moving, evictions, things disappearing. The kind of environment where anything could happen at any time. Where you went to bed not knowing what you'd wake up to. Where safety wasn't a given. Where predictability was a fantasy. And when you're 8 years old and your entire world is chaos, You have exactly two options: collapse under it or control what you can. So they chose control. They organized their room obsessively. They managed their younger siblings. They became hypervigilant and started predicting patterns, reading moods, managing emotions that weren't even theirs. And it worked. They survived. That strategy kept them functional in an environment that was designed to break them. But here's the cost. They never turned it off. Now they're 35. The chaos is gone. The house is stable, the money is fine. But they're still in survival mode, still scanning for threats that aren't there, still unable to trust that things won't fall apart if they stop white-knuckling reality, still convinced that relaxation equals danger. Or maybe they grew up in a house where mistakes had consequences. Not normal consequences, but disproportionate ones. Where a B grade wasn't just disappointing, it was a failure. Where good enough meant you weren't trying hard enough. Where love felt conditional on performance. Where approval had to be earned every single day and could be lost just as quickly. They learned early. Control the variables, control the outcome. Prepare for every scenario. Anticipate every question. Leave nothing to chance. And they got good at it. Really good. Scholarships, awards, promotions, external validation for internal terror. But they never developed a tolerance for low-stakes failure. Everything still feels like a final exam. Every interaction feels like a performance review. Even grocery shopping has win-lose conditions. Even casual conversations have optimal outcomes they're trying to engineer. Because somewhere deep in their wiring, failure still feels like abandonment. Imperfection still feels like rejection. And control is the only thing standing between them and that feeling. Or maybe it wasn't chronic. Maybe it was acute. One catastrophic trust violation at exactly the wrong developmental moment. A parent who left without warning. A partner who cheated after years of everything's fine. A friend who betrayed them when it mattered most. An authority figure who abused the trust they were given. And their brain, trying to make sense of it, trying to prevent it from ever happening again, made a brutal calculation. Relying on other people is structurally unsafe. Trusting creates vulnerability. Vulnerability creates the possibility of that pain again. So they didn't choose independence because it felt good. They chose it because dependence felt like standing in traffic. They didn't choose control because they're domineering. They chose it because giving up control once led to devastation. And they will never, ever let that happen again. They didn't become a control person. They became inoculated against disappointment. And the vaccine was total self-reliance. So when you're dealing with someone like this, whether it's your boss, your parent, your partner, your friend, this is what you're actually dealing with. Not stubbornness, not arrogance, not a personality flaw. You're dealing with a nervous system that learned, probably before age 12, that control equals survival, that letting go equals danger, that trusting others is a liability, and that the only safe place is total, constant, exhausting vigilance. And here's what makes this so complicated. They're usually not wrong about what happens when they let go, because they've spent 20 years building a life, a career, a family structure that actually does require their constant intervention to function. They've created the exact problem they're trying to solve, which brings us to what this actually costs. Not just them, everyone around them, and eventually the whole system. Whether you're watching someone do this, or whether you've recognized some of this in yourself, the cost structure is the same. And it's not what most people think. It's not just stress or burnout. It's way more specific and way more expensive. Controlling everything means tracking everything. Every variable, every outcome, every potential failure point, every person's emotional state, every deadline, every detail. That manager who won't delegate, they're running 47 simultaneous tabs in their head at all times. They know every client deadline, every team member's capacity, every potential bottleneck, every historical precedent for why things might go wrong. And they think this is strength. They think this is what leadership looks like. It's not. It's working memory collapse. They can't think strategically because they're thinking tactically about everything. They're so deep in the weeds, they can't see the field anymore. They know every tree, but they lost the forest 5 years ago and don't even realize it. They can tell you exactly what happened in the meeting last Tuesday, but they can't tell you if the company is moving in the right direction. They can spot a typo in an email, but they miss that their entire business model is getting disrupted. Tactically brilliant, strategically blind. People don't leave control-heavy people because they're demanding. Demanding is fine. People can handle demanding. People leave because they're suffocating, because there's no room to breathe, because every interaction is managed, because autonomy isn't allowed. Think about that parent who can't stop managing their adult children. Their kids don't visit, not because they don't love them, but because every visit is a performance review. Every conversation is an audit. Every decision they've made gets second-guessed. Every choice gets a well, I would have done it this way. Or that partner who redoes everything. Their relationship isn't a partnership anymore. It's quality assurance. Their significant other isn't a teammate. They're a trainee who never graduates. And eventually, that person stops trying. Because why try when it's going to get redone anyway? And here's the trap. The control person thinks people are leaving because they're not committed enough, because they can't handle high standards, because they're lazy or incompetent. They never see that people are leaving because they were never given room to be competent. They were never trusted to fail and learn. They were managed into helplessness and then blamed for being helpless. You can't scale what you can't delegate. You can't grow what you can't release. You can't take the big bets when you need certainty. That entrepreneur who won't hire because nobody can do it like they can, they're still making the same $150,000 a year 5 years in, still working 80-hour weeks, still convinced they're building something. But they can't build because they can't let go of any piece of it. Meanwhile, their competitor hired badly 3 times, made mistakes, lost money, learned, iterated, and now runs a $10 million company with systems that don't require them to be in every decision. The person who needs control doesn't take asymmetric bets, can't, because asymmetric bets require tolerating uncertainty. They require accepting that you might fail spectacularly, and that 9 out of 10 might not work. But the 10th one changes everything. Control-oriented people take the safe bet, the calculable bet, the bet where they can see all the variables, and they cap their entire life at whatever that ceiling is. Control requires vigilance. Vigilance requires cortisol. Cortisol has compound interest, and it never stops compounding. That person you're thinking of, they're not tired because they work hard. Lots of people work hard and sleep fine. They're tired because their nervous system has been in threat detection mode for 20 consecutive years. There's no off switch. There's no idle state. Vacation doesn't help because they're managing the vacation. Sleep doesn't help because they're planning tomorrow while trying to fall asleep. Rest doesn't help because rest feels like negligence, and the body keeps score. Insomnia, the jaw tension, digestive issues, the immune system starting to fray, the constant low-grade anxiety that they've stopped noticing because it's just become their baseline. In fact, they don't even remember what relaxed feels like. And all of this, all of it, is just the maintenance cost. That's not even the worst part. Because here's what makes this absolutely vicious. The more you control, the more you need to control. This isn't psychological, but instead mathematical. Control creates fragile systems, systems that are optimized for predictability, not resilience. Systems that work perfectly under specific conditions and collapse under variance. And fragile systems generate more chaos when unexpected things happen, which triggers more control behavior, which creates more fragility, and the loop tightens. The manager won't delegate. The team stops thinking independently because they've learned their ideas get overridden anyway, and hence becomes helpless. The manager now has to think for everyone, resulting in a burnout. Naturally, as a consequence, the system collapses the moment the manager gets sick or quits. Similarly, a parent manages everything for their kid, so the kid never learns autonomy and never develops frustration tolerance. Next, you know the kid fails the first time they're away from parental oversight. Now, the parent says, "See, they can't handle freedom. I was right to control everything," and then controls even harder, causing the kid to become even less capable, and the loop continues. Similarly, the partner redoes all the household tasks, so the other partner stops trying. Because why bother when it's just going to get redone? Their dynamic becomes parent-child instead of partner-partner. Next, the resentment builds on both sides, and the relationship dies, but neither person leaves because the dependent partner can't function independently anymore, and the controlling partner can't trust anyone else. And if you're smart, or if the person doing this is smart, it gets even worse. Because smart people are usually right when they take control. They do it better, faster, more thoroughly. They see the problems others miss. They catch the errors others overlook, so the behavior gets reinforced. Every single time. They take over, it works out, and their brain files that under proof I need to control things. They win every battle. They lose every war. But they can't see the wars they're not even fighting because they're too busy micromanaging the battles. They're tactically perfect and strategically doomed. And intelligence makes it worse because they can always justify it. They can always build a rational case for why this situation requires their intervention. They're not wrong. They're just solving the wrong problem. And if you're self-aware enough to recognize this pattern, whether in yourself or someone close to you, there's another trap waiting, one that most people don't see coming. You try to control your control issues. You read the books. You try the techniques. You practice letting go. You delegate something and then white-knuckle your way through not checking on it. You force yourself not to redo what someone else did. You try to relax, and it feels like holding your breath underwater. And what is that? It's just more control. You're now controlling your relationship with control. You're managing your management. You're micromanaging your micromanagement. It's recursive, it's exhausting, and it doesn't work because you're using the same operating system that created the problem to try to solve the problem. You can't think your way out of a nervous system issue. You can't self-help your way out of a survival adaptation because the part of you that's trying to fix it is the same part that's running the control program. It's like trying to use a virus to debug itself. And if you're watching this right now and thinking, okay, but I actually do need to control things because people around me are genuinely incompetent, or I only take over when it's really important, or if I don't do it, who will? It'll just fall apart. That's not a counter-argument to this pattern. That's the pattern talking. That's the exact voice of it. Because everyone who operates this way believes their situation is the exception, that their need for control is justified, that the people around them actually do require this level of management, and they can build an airtight logical case for it, which means the real question isn't, how do I let go? The real question is, what am I actually trying to control? And why does it feel like my survival depends on it? Whether you're dealing with someone like this, or whether you're starting to see yourself in this pattern, the core issue is the same. And it's not what anyone wants to hear. This isn't a control problem. It's a variable selection problem. You're not controlling too much. You're controlling the wrong things. Control itself isn't the enemy. Control is a tool. The problem is when you use that tool on variables that either don't matter or that you fundamentally cannot influence. And when you ignore the variables you actually can control, that would change everything. Every single variable in your life, and I mean every one, falls into one of three categories. And most people have never consciously categorized them. They just react. But if you want to understand why control is bankrupting you, this is it. These are things you can directly influence that actually matter. Your morning routine, your systems, your standards for your own work, your boundaries, how you respond to situations, what you say yes and no to, your environment, your inputs, your habits. Control these ruthlessly. This is where your discipline actually pays off. This is where being exacting and systematic and high standards produces compounding returns. This is your leverage. These are things you can't really influence, and that don't actually matter. Other people's opinions of you, minor inefficiencies that don't compound, surface-level chaos that resolves itself, what people think about your choices, small aesthetic preferences that have no functional impact. Ignore completely. This is just noise. Every minute you spend here is wasted. Every ounce of emotional energy you invest here produces zero return. And this is where it gets expensive. These are things you cannot actually control, but that matter a lot. Other people's decisions, other people's effort levels, other people's emotional reactions, market conditions, how fast someone learns, whether someone else cares as much as you do, random events, timing, luck. This is where the bleeding happens. This is where control-oriented people hemorrhage energy, because the impact makes it feel controllable. Because it matters, your brain tells you that you should be able to influence it, but you can't. And trying to control it is what's destroying you. If you're exhausted right now, if your relationships are strained, if you're working 80-hour weeks and nothing's actually moving forward, I can tell you exactly what's happening. You're spending 80% of your control budget on the third category. You're trying to control how hard other people work, how much they care, how fast they learn, whether they remember things without being reminded, whether they do it your way, whether they meet your standards without being managed. And none of it is actually yours to control. You can influence it slightly. You can create conditions, but you cannot control it. And every hour you spend trying is an hour you're not spending on the first category, where you actually have leverage. That manager redoing their team's work? Third category. They can't control how good the first draft is. They can control their hiring, their training systems, their feedback loops. First category. But instead, they're in the third category, rewriting emails at midnight. That parent micromanaging their adult child? Third category. They can't control their kids' choices. They can control their own boundaries, their relationship availability, whether they enable or support. First category. But they're stuck in the third category, trying to manage someone else's life. That partner redoing the chores? Third category. They can't control someone else's cleaning standards. They can control whether they communicate their needs, whether they hire help, whether they redistribute tasks. First category. But they're in the third category, resenting someone for not reading their mind. By now, everyone's told you to let go. Your therapist, your friends, the 14 self-help books on your shelf, every productivity guru, every leadership seminar. Let go. Relax. Trust people. Be more flexible. Release control. And you've tried. You really have. You delegated something and it went sideways, and you had to step in and fix it anyway. You trusted someone to handle it and they didn't, and you absorbed the consequences. You let people learn from mistakes, and the mistakes cost you time, money, reputation, peace of mind. So now you're convinced that letting go doesn't work for you, that your situation is different, that maybe it works for other people, but in your case, the stakes are actually too high. Here's why let go fails. Because it asks you to release control into a void. It asks you to stop controlling X without giving you Y to control instead. And your brain will not do that. It cannot do that. Not because you're broken, not because you're a control freak, but because you're wired for pattern recognition. Your nervous system learned that control equals safety, and you can't just delete that program. You can't uninstall survival adaptations with affirmations. You don't need less control. You need better targets. You need to redirect the same intensity, the same precision, the same drive toward variables that actually respond to it. You can't control whether they hire you. You can control your pitch quality, your preparation, your follow-up system. You can't control whether your kid becomes successful. You can control whether you're a safe person to fail around, whether you model the behaviors you want to see, whether you create an environment that encourages risk-taking. You can't control whether the relationship works out. You can control your boundaries, your communication patterns, whether you're showing up as the partner you want to be. Outcomes have too many variables, most of them outside your control. Inputs are yours, and inputs compound over time in ways that outcomes don't. You can't control someone's work ethic. You can control who you hire, who you keep, who you fire. You can't control your parents' anxiety. You can control your phone boundaries, your visit frequency, how much emotional labor you're willing to absorb. You can't control whether your team cares. You can control the incentive structures, the culture you build, who gets promoted. Stop trying to change people. People change when they want to, on their timeline, for their reasons. You can't control that. But you can control your proximity to them. You can control who has access to your time, your energy, your trust. You can't eliminate mistakes. Even with perfect systems, variance happens. But you can build systems that survive mistakes. Systems that catch errors before they compound. Systems that fail gracefully. You can't prevent chaos. The world is fundamentally unpredictable. But you can reduce the blast radius. You can build redundancy. You can separate critical from non-critical. Perfect is fragile. Anti-fragile beats perfect, every single time. And anti-fragile is something you can actually control. So here's what actually works. Not therapy speak, not affirmations, not trust the universe. Structural recalibration. You're going to use your control drive to redesign what you control. Take 30 minutes, not tomorrow, today. Get a piece of paper or open a document. List everything you're actively managing right now. Work projects, home tasks, relationships, your own behavior, other people's behavior, everything that's taking up mental space. Then go through each item and ask 2 questions. Question 1, can I actually control this? Yes or no? Not can I influence it. Can you directly control it? Your answer is your own behavior, your systems, your environment. That's yes. Other people's choices, reactions, effort, timing, that's no. Question 2, does this actually matter? Not does it feel like it matters? Does it have meaningful impact on outcomes you care about? Will this matter in 3 months, in a year, yes or no? Now map everything into 4 quadrants. High control plus high impact. These are your force multipliers, your systems, your routines, your boundaries, your standards for your own work. Double down here. This is where you should be spending 80% of your control energy. This is where it compounds. High control plus low impact. These are the things you can control but don't actually matter. Which brand of notebook you use, whether your desk is perfectly organized, minor aesthetic preferences. Automate these, delegate these, delete these. Stop spending energy here. Low control plus high impact. This is the danger zone. Other people's decisions that affect you. Market conditions. Whether a client says yes, whether your kid makes good choices. These matter, but you can't control them. Your job is to either accept them or exit the situation. Those are your only 2 moves. Low control plus low impact. What other people think of your choices. Minor chaos that resolves itself. Small inefficiencies that don't compound. Ignore completely. Pretend this quadrant doesn't exist. If you're honest about this mapping, you'll find that most of your stress, most of your time, most of your emotional energy is in the bottom left quadrant. Low control, high impact. You're trying to control things that don't respond to control, and it's eating you alive. For the next 2 weeks, every time you feel the urge to control something, stop for 5 seconds and ask, which quadrant is this? If it's not top left, don't engage. Redirect to something in the top left quadrant. You cannot trust yourself to let go voluntarily. Your nervous system won't allow it. So stop trying to white-knuckle your way through it. Instead, build external systems that force you to let go. When you delegate something, tell the person, I'm not available to answer questions about this for 48 hours. Then actually make yourself unavailable. Leave town. Turn off your phone. Delete your email app. Make it structurally impossible to rescue. Your brain will panic. Let it. The panic is just the old program running. It's not accurate information. Sit with the discomfort. The task will get done. Maybe not perfectly, but it will get done. And you'll learn that the world doesn't collapse when you're not managing everything. Build systems that run without you. Automations, templates, processes that don't require your approval. Then make it annoying to override them. Put the admin password somewhere inconvenient. Add friction to intervention. The goal is to make meddling harder than letting it run. Fight your control drive with intentional inconvenience. Find someone you trust and give them veto power over your micromanagement. If you see me redoing someone else's work, you have permission to call me out. Or if I try to take back something I delegated, stop me. External control over your control. Fight fire with fire. You're currently measuring success by 0 errors, by perfect execution, by whether everything went according to plan. And that's why you're trapped. Because perfect is fragile, and reality is chaotic, and you'll be chasing perfect until you die exhausted. Metric 1. Recovery speed. Not did this go perfectly, but when it broke, how fast did we recover? How quickly did you adapt? How much did you learn? Did the failure destroy the system or make it stronger? Metric 2. System resilience. Not did we avoid problems, but can our system survive problems? If someone quits, does everything collapse? If you get sick, does work stop? If a client leaves, do we panic? Metric 3. Compounding over time. Not was this perfect today, but is this building something that gets easier over time? Are you creating assets or just completing tasks? Resilience compounds. Perfection doesn't. A system that recovers from failure gets stronger. A system optimized for 0 failure gets more fragile. You can control your resilience. You cannot control whether things break. If you're someone who needs control, or if you're dealing with someone who does, here's what almost no one will tell you, and what you need to hear. This is not a weakness. This is not a character flaw. This is not something to be ashamed of. This is a badly allocated strength. The same drive that makes you micromanage other people can make you completely unshakable in your own domain if you redirect it. The same pattern recognition that creates anxiety when you watch other people work can create strategic dominance when you apply it to your own systems if you recalibrate it. The same intolerance for chaos that ruins your relationships can build anti-fragile systems that withstand anything if you point it at the right targets. The same intensity that exhausts everyone around you can compound into something extraordinary if you stop trying to control the uncontrollable and start controlling the controllable with absolute precision. You don't have to become spontaneous. You don't have to become loose or flexible or chill. You don't have to lower your standards. You can stay exacting, systematic, rigorous, intense. You can stay exactly as demanding as you are. You just have to aim at the right target. You just have to control what's actually yours to control. But if you don't recalibrate, if you keep trying to control other people, outcomes, chaos, variables that don't respond to control, this is where you're headed. You will burn out. Not might, will. Your body will force the issue eventually, because it can't sustain threat mode forever. Your relationships will atrophy. People will stop trying to connect with you because connection requires space, and you don't leave space for anything you don't control, your potential will cap. Because you can't scale past what you can personally manage, and you've made yourself the bottleneck of your entire life. This is not about becoming a different person. This is about pointing the same intensity in a different direction. That's it. Same engine, different destination. Control is not the problem. Controlling everything is the problem. And the only way to stop controlling everything is to control the right things so precisely, so systematically, so completely, that the rest becomes genuinely irrelevant. Not because you've learned to let go, but because you've built systems strong enough that letting go is no longer dangerous. The people who look the most relaxed, the most secure, the most confident, they're not controlling less, they're controlling better. They've figured out what's actually theirs to control, and they've stopped wasting energy on everything else. Now, subscribe and watch this video next.